Hello everyone, I'm Wave, and today I want to talk about a visual novel that I just finished reading recently by the name of Cosmos no Sora. This is, I guess, what you could call a pretty bare bones, or maybe even jank visual novel because it is quite old school, but I ended up appreciating how quaint it ended up feeling, how funny, as well as emotional it could be at times. So, let's get into it. So Cosmos no Sora is a pretty old school VN. If you were to try to boot up Cosmos no Sora, you're probably going to end up getting a pop-up saying that this game isn't running on the operating system that it was intended to be played on. So if you were to ever try and play Cosmos no Sora, the first thing you're going to end up having to do is installing a fan mod by the name of the Chaos mod. The Chaos mod allows it to where you're going to be able to play Cosmos no Sora on a lot of newer computer operating systems. So I'll be leaving a link to that down in the description for those of you that are interested in ever checking out Cosmos no Sora. But once you do get into Cosmos no Sora, I think the first couple of minutes are actually going to be pretty impressive. At least they were to me. I ended up liking how the introduction to the game starts. You wake up pretty late into the day and you're woken up by one of the main characters. And then after that conversation ends, you get thrust straight into the opening sequence. And then following that, you get a little bit of foreshadowing for some of the things to come before then being properly thrust into the story and get to see all of the normal things you're going to be seeing throughout Cosmos no Sora's story. So Cosmos no Sora, I think, is a little bit basic. How the structure of the story works is that you're going to be playing through, I guess, what would be mostly just a common route with different branches depending on all of your choices. But I think when we talk about the choices, Cosmos no Sora I ended up finding to be quite exhilarating and fun. It relies on a lot of slapstick humor, and you can have a lot of very out there dialogue options that I found to be pretty funny and really do a good job at slapstick humor. Maybe even more so because of the fact that this game doesn't have any voice acting within it. So I think in a way, like I said earlier, maybe Cosmos no Sora feels very bare bones, but I think it did its best with what was available to it in that without any voice acting. I think the humor goes very hard. But yeah, Cosmos no Sora has some very out there dialogue options, and I also appreciated that there is a lot of 3 dialogue options, which I feel a lot of the time while I'm playing a VN, the most I'm gonna get is 2. I've had a couple where I have a 3 dialogue option, but I like that there's a lot of variance and a lot of branching paths that you can go ahead and do throughout the course of a playthrough of Cosmos no Sora. And I like too that it's pretty simple to land onto any of the 5 character routes within Cosmos no Sora. They're all pretty early on into when you can kind of lock into a certain character route. So there isn't really any necessity to go ahead and follow a strict guide for a walkthrough. You can do some of the crazier options and just have fun seeing what kinds of crazy antics can happen throughout the course of a playthrough of Cosmos no Sora. But also I ended up really liking that as you get further and further into a route, you start to branch off from that common route and get into what would actually be more so of a dedicated character route. And as you get into each character route, things start to unfold as far as the main character's backstory and also how that ends up affecting the relationship with whatever character route that you are on, to where Cosmos no Sora is able to go from this very heavy slapstick humor into what I ended up finding was a pretty enjoyable, emotional story. Like I've said already a couple times now, Cosmos no Sora feels a little bit bare bones. There's a whole lot of stuff as far as music, in that the game as well doesn't really have a good way for looping tracks. A music track will play just the one time for any dedicated scene, and once it is finished playing, it won't actually loop at all. So you end up having these very long, drawn out moments sometimes for a couple of scenes to where you're just reading through and you have complete silence because of just how the game is made. But at the same time, I ended up really appreciating how quaint Cosmos no Sora ended up feeling, to where I think by the time that I finished it, I ended up really enjoying that, with how emotional I ended up feeling, that I thoroughly really did just enjoy reading Cosmos no Sora as a whole. So I guess getting back into how I was saying, where it's a little bit bare bones, on top of the fact of the audio not really being all that great. I do also really quickly want to talk about the audio though, because as the audio only ever really plays for the singular instance of a scene before you just get dead silence, I think the OST in general is really, really good. Like, tell me why. I'm on my third route of Cosmos no Sorny, and I end up encountering a brand new character that is just part of this other character's route, and they have a theme that is this much of a banger. But yeah, I do think the OST of Cosmos no Sorny is really, really good and has like a lot of variants. There, a lot of the instrumentation is kind of like all over the place, but I feel like as a whole, it kind of goes in with like the slapstick humor to where the song that would play during some of the more jokey or like zany moments within the story, and I feel was kind of jarring at first, but I ended up getting really used to it over time. For other things, as far as like how jank Cosmos no Sorny can feel, there is no voice acting, which I know is a little bit of a deal breaker for some people. I ended up feeling like the fact that there is no voice acting ended up actually helping the game, because for some of the like super crazy moments, you're able to kind of like in your own head kind of imagine the zaniness of like a potential voice acting without it needing to be like, oh, if it fell flat because of maybe the voice acting didn't do the lines justice. But at the same time too, there's also some pretty like out there things that they could do because of the fact that there is no voice acting. But then also one other thing I think is maybe also another deal breaker for people is that there is no like menus, and by that I mean like something as simple as a skip previously read dialogue button. So the only way you're kind of able to skip around through dialogue on a subsequent playthrough is by just clicking the control button. There is no option for skip read dialogue. But it was something that I got used to quite quickly, and I think it's not too much of an issue, but it is something that I think is worth mentioning. But at the end of the day, I ended up really enjoying Cosmos no Sorny. It took me quite a while to actually get through it, and by the time that I was getting towards the end, I ended up having that little bit of like a feeling deep down that I get only ever like a couple of times while reading VNs, to where I'm like, oh man, I'm getting towards the end, I'm gonna miss this VN, because I thoroughly really did enjoy my time with Cosmos no Sorny. Found it to be a pretty like quaint game with a relatively like low ceiling as far as the story, but I ended up really enjoying the emotional moments that happen towards the later portions of each and every single character route, into where I think Cosmos no Sorny is a very bare bones, very like scuffed or jank visual novel at the end of the day, but at the same time I didn't let that bother me, and I really ended up appreciating it for what it was. So yeah, those have been my thoughts on Cosmos no Sorny. Thank you guys for watching. I've been Wave, and I will see you next time.